Marketing strategies require clear, actionable, and achievable metrics to reach your goals. In this episode of Beyond the Logo, we're going to be discussing generational marketing. Things we will cover is media consumption, events, and finance, and how that impacts how we market to boomers, Generation X, millennials, and also Generation Y. Don't go away. We'll be right back. If you've just joined, then welcome to Beyond Logo with Nancy and Bridgetti. I'm your host, Bridgetti Banda from Cape Town in South Africa, and our stream is made possible by StreamYard, Lockhart Marketing, and BeLive Media. So a special warm welcome, whether you're joining us over on Amazon Live, on Facebook, on YouTube, or over on LinkedIn, or even Twitter. A very warm welcome. It's an audience-centric show, so you're welcome to participate in the comments. And today's show, we're going to be talking about generational marketing and why you should use it in your marketing strategy. If it's your first time watching the show, we'd love to give you a shout out. My amazing co-host is Nancy Lockhart, but before I introduce her, part of the things that we do on the show is helping you to level up on your marketing. And I wanted to just share one or two things that you can do to level up on your online appearance, because we're all using video these days. So one of the things that you can do is not rely on your built-in camera on your laptop or your desktop. You can invest in a DSLR if you have the budget to do that, because that is absolutely the first prize. But what I recommend for most people is a good webcam. And one of the brands that I highly recommend is Logitech. Most of the people in the streaming community that I'm aware of do use the Logitech if they don't use a DSLR camera. And so the one that I'm using is the Logitech Brio webcam. And the reason why the Logitech Brio camera is recommended is because it's got HDR right side technology built into it. And what that means in plain English is that it adjusts to your lighting conditions, which means you don't have to fiddle too much with lighting, as long as your lighting is front facing and not from behind you. There's another quick tip thrown in there. So again, recommendation is that you use an external webcam, either a DSLR, or that you use something like the Logitech Brio 4K camera. The other recommendation when you are live streaming or going live or promoting your brand is that you use a good microphone, so people can actually hear you and they don't tune out, because people will tune out if they can't hear you very clearly. So what I use is the Samsung condenser microphone. It's got a very, very solid die-cast, and that means that it'll absorb the vibrations, so you get a clear sound. But not everybody wants to invest in a huge microphone. This is a condenser microphone. What you can do alternatively is also get a lapel microphone like this one, which is the Rode Lavalier. That's my other recommendation so that you get good sound. And all it does is it simply clips onto you and people can hear you very clearly. If you are doing some kind of marketing for a product, for example, a great way to have a different camera angle on your product is to position your phone on top of a tripod. Um, but a lot of people try and do that using their hand, and that's a bad idea because you'll get a shaky image and people will tune out, and it doesn't come across very professional at all. So I've got two things that you can use on top of your tripod, something like the DJI Osmo, which will balance your phone. So you're basically going to put your phone in there and it's going to balance your phone so that it's not shaky. It'll hold the image, especially if you're walking around in your office or your studio or wherever you are and you're demonstrating a product. Something like the DJI Osmo stabilizer is going to be fantastic. But if you're stationary in your office, good morning over there on Amazon Live. Great to have you join us. Yes, stabilizer works perfectly. So that's if you're on the move, get something like that. But if you are just in your office, you can also use something like that. And a quick tip, if you see I'm holding it in this position in landscape, if you want to avoid those black lines that you get, is if you're holding your phone in portrait, so you do want to hold it in landscape, and then you're not going to get those awful looking black lines. You want to use the full screen state when you are busy marketing your products or services. So it's time to bring on my amazing co-host, Nancy Lockhart. She's the founder of Lockhart Marketing and a #1 best-selling author. Nancy's worked with some of the most iconic brands such as Target, Kaiser Permanente, Medtronic, and she leverages her knowledge and expertise to help successful women business owners and the men who support them to become profitable, successful, and purpose-driven. Nancy's also the executive advisor to the University of California, Santa Barbara Customer Experience Program. And so with that, Nancy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bridgetti. Good to see you again.
Likewise, likewise, likewise. Oh my goodness. You know, some of the things you think about when it comes to marketing, I often wonder how, you've got such a wealth of information. You're just a powerhouse. I mean,
Oh,
I never
thank
thought our topic today, um, generational marketing, but
you.
it absolutely is right. And so I can't wait to just dive into this topic. Um, and the Cookbook Divas over on Amazon Live is also saying to you, hello, Nancy.
Oh, hello. Nice to see you, or nice to hear from you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I do think, Bridgetti, we think of when we think of target marketing, certainly one of the things that we think about are, the age group that we're targeting. When we think about the generational marketing, it helps us to refine our target markets and really, but it also helps to bring in some of those psychographics, the experiences that those generations have had. And I think one of the reasons why generational marketing and paying attention to that is so critical, because as cohorts of ages, they've had experiences that are very similar, that shape the way they view the world, and also, your products and services and how you communicate with them. So I think it's an exciting topic, and it's really, eye-opening to when you start to lay it out and to think about how each generation has had different experiences. Is it evolving in sophistication, or, with regard to any of the topics that we're going to discuss? Oh,
Something interesting, just as we delve into this topic here, that I always find um, very interesting is the fact that, if you're marketing something to a parent, for example, via the child, you're going to be changing your marketing strategy as opposed to marketing it to the child who's then got to sell it to their parent. So
Hmm.
it's a very,
Yeah.
very different approach.
Yeah. And it's interesting because kids, we're going to even talk about Generation Alpha, which we don't have much statistics about, but and some of them aren't even born. But the influence that and the sophistication that they have with regard to, technology is so impressive and something to very much keep in mind. So where we've traditionally thought of in that marketing, the child talking to the parent, often the child has influence over the parents marketing beyond just what the child wants. So we're evolving, and our kids are our kids are really smart. So they're savvy.
They really, really are. They can often teach us a thing or two. So
Absolutely.
so let's dive into our topic, shall we? Why use generational marketing?
Well, I touched on it a little bit, but really, just to kind of elaborate a little bit, it's really helpful to understand the cultural influences that have shaped different generations. And when like I said, when you start to really lay it out, you can see how things are, people influence and absorb information differently, how they want to be spoken to or connected with. But it is more, it's more nuanced than just particularly cutting up age groups or, generations. So you want to be mindful of that. And that's certainly what we're going to be talking about. It really is cost efficient when you start thinking about where you want to put your dollars, your marketing dollars, whether it be creative or media. Once you just, get your target market, understand what your purpose is in your marketing efforts, this really can help you to spend your money, your budgets most efficiently. So it's really important to use this as a tool to help shape and maximize your marketing budgets and dollars.
I think that nails it very, very nicely. You want to get the best for your buck. And so
Yes.
having those things in mind is going to be super useful. We're starting with
Yes.
the boomers.
The boomers, everyone's heard of the baby boomers. It was kind of one of the very first marketing cohorts that marketers were paying attention to because there was such a large group of people. The previous generation had gone through, the war, had come together and created boomers, for lack of a better term. So we have a very large group of people in this cohort. Their birth years are between 1945 and 1954. And I would caution, as we're talking through this, that this is a generalization. So not, if you're on the edge, it's not necessarily you're going to be this way or that way, but it's to keep in mind and to guide you. So that current age would be 57 to 75. This is like I said, a very, very large market with almost 72 million people that are in that market. And of course, their nicknames are baby boomers, as we're all very familiar with. The thing about them is that they're still very traditional in their how they consume their marketing. So TV, print, magazines, newspaper, radio. That's what they're most used to consuming because they've had for a while. However, 90% of them do have Facebook accounts, and oftentimes that social media avenue is a way for them to really connect and for us to really maximize when talking to some of these I would say more having life experience, I'll say, have really access through Facebook. Again, they're shaping events, which is important for us to remember is going through, kind of coming out of World War II, being optimistic for the future, but they're still dealing with this Cold War, which is, it's interesting how history is kind of repeating itself a little bit. Not that the current situation we're in is a Cold War, but that kind of tension within the air, and also the hippie movement. So this kind of throwback of this bit of rebellion of kind of what your traditional parents were. There's elements of that are in the baby boomer in their psyche. So it's important to kind of address that, understand that a little bit as we're marketing to them. They do have, even though they're older and probably have been out of school for a while, they do have the highest amount of student debt and overall debt. Now, they also have the most wealth. So it's how they're deciding to use that wealth to pay off debt. Also, their debt is primarily with traditional, where you would see debt to be, like in your mortgage in a home. But they're also very concerned about, as they are entering retirement or in retirement, how they maintain their lifestyle. People are living longer. And so they're very aware and focused on how to continue to fund in their retirement years, or as they approach their retirement years. So
those are such valid points, that you mentioned there. They do have the most wealth, but they also have a lot of debt.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And it's something where and I'm not a financial planner, but as you're thinking about personally, how do I use my wealth most effectively? Is it to pay down debt? Is it to invest? That type of thing, funding my retirement, which would be another form of investing. You kind of have to do that dance when you're dealing with that. So it's really important to keep that in mind as you're thinking about this cohort of target.
Absolutely.
So go ahead.
No, carry on. Fine.
Okay. So just with those statistics, just wanted to pull out some key points about actually marketing to boomers. While there is, a lot of them, the targeting for that market is very, very low, even though they have the highest buying power. So it's interesting because when you connect with them, they feel very loyal, and they feel very much like they're heard. They also are very much wanting to be part of a group or part of a program. So if you're offering some type of a discount to that group, they'll consume that very effectively, and it will pique their interest. So you have like 75% are more likely to purchase if they have a coupon or loyalty discount. And you'll see that's different in some of the other generations. We talked about how many people have Facebook accounts and are actively engaging on Facebook is 82%, or 90% have accounts. They're really using those accounts, those Facebook interactions. And 86% are going to research products online, which is interesting to hear, because that is a bit of an evolution from the traditional consumption of marketing. But they're looking online because they recognize the power, the real-time power and information that can be absorbed from an online experience. And then, as I said, 71% participate in loyalty programs and get discounts or deals. In the image that I have, it's a picture. It's a group of women, multi-generational, and it's through Citibank. And this group of women is like powerful. They have different accesses, different employment statuses, but it is part of a woman and cohort where they come together. And that is something that really is nice, because you start to see that representation of the baby boomer generation coming together, so it's not just off to the side, but it's an interactive group, which appeals very strongly to the boomers.
It definitely does. I mean, I've seen that myself. It's a very visibly cohort of people who really does like the group thing.
Right. Yes, it is. And so when you're thinking about, if your target is primarily that, this is where you start to maximize your campaign ideas and your marketing dollars, is to say, let's put together a group. Let's get some membership, and you can leverage Facebook groups so efficiently in that way because they're on Facebook and they want to be part of a group. So just a way to kind of shape, oh yeah, that might be a really cost efficient way to gain loyalty and to gain, customers and clients.
Absolutely. Facebook groups is still a huge thing. A lot of people say, well, is
Across
Facebook dead?
generations.
No, it
Yeah.
isn't. But the group
Mhm.
function on Facebook is absolutely massive. A quick tip on groups though, since it is such a huge big thing, um, you do want to make sure that you've got that data on your Facebook group stored somewhere else. Don't be completely reliant on
Great.
storing everything on Facebook, because remember, Facebook does not belong to you or I. So anything
Yeah.
stored on there actually belongs to Facebook. I don't care what they say, but it's their land, and they
Mhm.
literally can pull the plug on you. And I've seen them do that
Yeah.
with massive groups. So don't rely on them storing your data. Make sure that you're exporting your data somewhere else onto your own domain where you have full control over it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bridgetti, for that tip. And I think that's kind of part of what we do in the show is to advocate for our audience, for their business and their success, to bring tips, but also to make sure that you're aware that there's not one be all end all mode for communicating with your customers and your clients. So thank you. So our next cohort is Generation X. Again, a well-known lexicon in culture. These birth years are between 1965 and 1980. Their current age is 41 to 56. They are 65.2 million. And they're known as the latchkey generation, the MTV generation. So that kind of 80s influence when they were coming of age, if you will, was really big. And I will admit that I am part of that Generation X. So I'm loud and proud with this one. So their media consumption, they do read newspapers, and it's more of an experience when they're doing like the kind of the traditional stuff, newspapers, magazines. It is a way to kind of unplug and to consume information. So it's more of I think more of a luxury thing versus this is how I get my information. They listen to the radio, they watch TV, but they are digitally savvy, and they too are all mostly on Facebook. So not as quite as high engagement on Facebook, but that is a key place for them. The thing about this generation is that it was the end of the Cold War, kind of this feeling of a renewed hope, the rise of personal computing. So I do remember being in high school with my giant computer and writing, trying to write code, which is ridiculous that I would have to. Anyone would think I could do that effectively, but it was the advent of that kind of interaction. The thing about this generation is that it's smaller than the generations it's sandwiched between, and they're often feel like they're kind of sandwiched between and almost a little bit not addressed. So I think it's important when you're thinking about this generation to keep that in mind as kind of an advocacy of this group. Although it is quite big, it's 65.2 million. There is that feeling a little bit of I'm still here. Like I said, they're sandwiched between kids and aging parents. So that's another nuance that you really have to pay attention to, because they're kind of split. While they feel like they're not being heard, they're also trying to maintain and support two different generations where they're kind of stuck in the middle. They do have student debt, and also again they do have that mortgage payments that they're considering as well.
Absolutely. Talking about us.
Talking about us. So they are extremely, when you're thinking about marketing to them, they're extremely loyal. When a brand gets them, they stay with that brand, which I can totally relate to. 81% have made purchases online, which I find that number, personally, it feels like it's low because I think I do almost all of my shopping online, but I am a focus group of one. So I will trust the statistics that a great majority do have purchased online. And right,
I
they're
think,
shifting from, go ahead.
sorry, just to interrupt you there. I know one of the things, and I know we'll probably dive into this next week a little bit, and we'll
Yeah.
reveal at the end of the show what our topic is going to be next week. But I must say I do probably 9% of shopping online now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I've completely pivoted online.
Well, and even, thinking about the influence of COVID, too, people are used to doing many more things online because they've been forced to interact more online. So, maybe that statistics has risen a little bit more. But yeah, it's an effective, cost efficient way to connect with your audience in this particular generation. Appreciates when you acknowledge them and their needs. So they get their information through email marketing, which is, I think it's something that we think, or I think of it as like, of course, that's how you get information. Whereas generations after ours tend to get more like text or go through influencer, which we'll talk a little bit more. They do use the internet to research brands and get information on companies based on reviews or going to their website. Again, a lot of them feel forgotten in being communicated to because there's just so much information going to the two generations that they're sandwiched between. I did want to point out this example that I thought was it warmed my heart. So I know it's being effective to my Generation X. But there's a feeling sometimes when you're feeling lost, like no one's paying attention to me. And Uber did this awesome thing. They partnered with SBCA, and you could, when you order whatever, if you order Uber or you order Uber Eats, you could actually request that they bring a kitten that needs to be adopted, and you get to play. They bring it to you with your food. You get to play with the kitten for like half an hour, and they'll take it away, but you can also have an option to adopt it. It's brilliant on the SBCA. It's a really like way of saying, hey, we're hearing you. Here's something special and cute to just like release some of your tension or to be heard. So I loved the campaign, and I am a sucker for kittens. So I might just order Uber Eats just because I want to see a kitten.
Oh my gosh. Talk about something that warms the heart and that
Yeah.
pulls, like, sucks you in emotionally, right?
It's almost like being a grandma, right? You get to like play with the little one and then give it back. No kitty litter cleaning required.
Exactly,
So that was
exactly like that. Oh my gosh.
So next one is our Millennials and Gen Y. So again, these folks are born between 1980 and 1996. They are kind of the current up and coming 25 to 40-year-olds. They're larger, 72.1 million. They have nicknames of Gen Y, Gen Me, Echo Boomers. Again, you see with the Echo Boomers, they've just skipped over Gen X, so gone right to Echo Boomers. But it's really important because these are the up and coming people within their careers. They're really part of the workforce right now. They do have a spending they have disposable income, or they're becoming able to have some disposable income. They still watch TV, but primarily where they're getting their TV is Netflix. And I think we're seeing more and more of the subscription TV. So we say Netflix, but I think in general, it would be any kind of a subscription-based TV that they're mostly consuming. They're very comfortable with their mobile devices. And 32% use a computer they use computers for their computer purchases, but they have multiple social media accounts. So you start to see the drift, not so brand loyal to Facebook, but you have Instagram and Snapchat and LinkedIn, and they start to kind of branch out a little bit more when it comes to those social media accounts. The things to keep in mind is, they were part of the Great Recession, and again, it's like kind of where history's sort of repeating itself a little bit for this alpha generation that we'll talk about in a little bit. But this is when the internet really exploded. Social media really became the way to communicate. And something that's super important, at least, in the United States, is this was the generation of 9/11, when there was a little bit of this vulnerability of, being not sure where something could happen to them, where they weren't expecting it. So important to keep that in mind. Like I said, they're powering the workforce. They have a lot of debt, and they're also delaying major purchases because they want to address the debt and want to make sure that they're prepared for things like, buying a home or getting married. So some of that, I think, is also influenced by, with what happened with COVID, where there was a lot of plans to move forward, and then it was kind of like, let's reevaluate. So they're thoughtful, they're responsible, and so that's I think an important piece about this generation. So as they're becoming very, very, very solidly adults and growing up, they're actually really taking things very seriously with regard to their spending. So
Absolutely.
Yes. Next up is millennials. We love our millennials. So they are, I did millennials, Gen Y. So marketing to millennials, it's okay to use content generated by influencers. So they really use those influencers to make their purchasing decisions. They use digital coupons. So they'll download it and have it within their social media. They want brands to really find ways to personalize the experience. And I think they're used to having, they're used to a experience of like, you have my information, you have my data. So make sure that you're communicating to me in a way that resonates with me. And they're pretty brand loyal as well. And they do respond to, because they're interacting so much with their social media, they are responding to products and offers that are sent to their mobile phones. What's important to them really is also like compassion. And I said personalization. So this example here is from REI. And they were one of the first retailers to close on Black Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving in the United States, which is often a huge retail opportunity for folks, because most people have that day off, at least in the United States. And what they did is they said, hey, we're going to close, but we want you to go out, take pictures, share with us how you're interacting on this day off, and we're going to talk about it in social media. So you can see how that's really appealing to them from a like, oh, you're being aware of, we need our time off, we need to take a pause. But they're also very clever because REI is an outdoor, sports company. And so they're encouraging people to take what they have, the items that they have, and show them in great locations of outdoors and hiking or biking or whatever, and therefore piquing interest in the activities that they promote and they sell equipment for. So that was a really clever, I thought, marketing example for marketing to millennials.
Absolutely. Very on target there.
Yes. So Generation Z, birth years between 1997 and 2012. I have two of them. Their current age is 9 to 24. Their size is 68 million. So they're a little bit smaller than the boomers or the Gen X, or I'm sorry, the boomers or the millennials. But they still are significant market size. They really are called the I generation or post millennials. So we do have a little bit of a nod from the millennial group into Generation Z. They, they're very savvy when it comes to the technology. They received their first mobile phone around age 10. They were adolescents. They are very connected to their smartphone. I have two daughters. It's very, very hard to find them without their cell phone in their hand. But it's a great way to discipline them. Taking away your phone. No, they don't like that. But this isn't a parenting show. They really, they were the first to really, it was indoctrinated in their lives, social media. So that's how they communicate. That's how they, they don't pick up the phone and call each other. It's everything's through social media. Most things are through social media. So they have a very different experience than, what Bridgetti and I went through as we were growing up during that time. So it's interesting to really highlight that they're going to be, that's the media that they're going to consume. That's the way they're going to interact. Again, it's very interesting because they're fiscally conservative, which is, I think, is really refreshing, and they want to avoid debt, and they want to, they're much more savvy about, using mobile banking, but they recognize that there's not, kind of an unlimited supply. So you would think this Generation Z with I generation and kind of some of the bad connotations that they've gotten of being selfish, and self-centered, they do understand that there are, limitations, and they want to be smart about their purchases. They want to make sure that it's the right thing for them. So they're very savvy in that respect. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it is nice to know. So marketing to Generation Z, they're very savvy about different omni-channel experiences. So that means, like, if you talk to them in one social media, it really is about different social media channels. Perhaps they see some other media method, but it's going to be on the fringe. They're really going to be focused on those social media channels, but they want to see different ways that you're coming at them through social media. They do shop in stores because it's an experience for them. But of course they'd rather shop online. They're very very aware of the environment. They're very kind of, they want to be preserving the earth. So they think of shopping online as being a little less of an impact on the footprint of shopping. However, packaging is super, super important. So if they're shopping online and they're getting, packages that have, packages within packages, and they see a lot of waste, it is a turnoff. So environmental packaging, recycling, that type of thing is very important to them. They use rewards. So reward programs are really important to them, and they collect and they interact with them. That also makes them feel seen and heard as being part of a group, but it also taps into their responsibility and knowing how to get, they want to get the best deal for what they're purchasing. They take personal recommendations into account when buying products. And so, their friends are super important, but so are social media influencers. The other thing is that they check in with their parents to get their feedback on purchases 90% before deciding to buy. And I know that I have experienced that with my kids. And while they don't have a ton of disposable income to purchase things when they're considering something, they do, research, and they do go, hey, does this make sense? So they're checking in. So makes me proud of this generation. and
Which
this oh, go ahead.
it's so different from the previous generation.
Hmm.
Um, that kind of don't want you to be too involved in their choices.
Hmm.
So it's quite a shift.
It is a shift. It really is, and it's refreshing. Although they still have their own opinions about things, and they sometimes, they'll they'll ask for information, but will respond through their own filters and through their own, how they've been they've interacted with the world. The example I have here is it's a YouTube video of this woman who is who's a swimmer, but she's in the Paralympics. So she swims and she's won gold medals, but it's really a day in her life. It's from Crocs. They do not highlight Crocs. There's zooms of Crocs shoes throughout this kind of, like little movie of her day. Like, what does her day look like? And it is something that's very appealing to this audience. It's like, don't patronize me, but align with causes and align with some of the things that are important to me. Inclusion is very, very important. So inclusion of different races, religions, abilities. So that's a super important part of this generation of kids that are really bringing forward their hearts and their emotions. I know I'm biased because I have two kids. I'm hopeful.
I don't think I've ever seen such a heightened awareness of inclusiveness
Hmm.
uh, in marketing, and people will jump on it.
Yes.
If any sector seems to be excluded or isn't inclusive, I think this generation has really brought a lot of things to our attention in the older
Hmm.
generation. So they jump on things. They're on social media all the time. So if they feel something
1000%.
isn't right, they're unlike the older generations. Unlike the older generations, they're more likely to speak up on social media if something isn't right.
Absolutely. So you get a little tiny bit of the nod to when we were talking about the boomers, the hippie kind of this like liberal, like if you're excluding someone, it doesn't matter if you're including me, but if you're including or excluding another cohort or another um, person, they're going to be turned off. So they want to see you supporting this, the world and all the people that are in the world, and it is. I mean, it's refreshing. There are times when it's a very there's a fine line to walk between what is their idealistic views and kind of what reality is, but that's part of them growing. And so this optimism and this inclusion, I think, is super healthy, and it makes me proud that they are doing that. And quite honestly, it is an education for older generations as well to be thinking about things a little bit differently. So kudos to them for bringing that forward as well.
Absolutely.
So now we have the the babies. They're not even born yet, but they do have a name. Um, they're Generation Alpha. They don't have any other nicknames yet, but I'm sure they will. Their birth years are between 2012 and approximately 2025. So they're 0 to 10. They're 35 million and growing. So obviously we've got a few more years to add to this particular generation. But it's really important, I think, to pay attention to them because they are, I mean, the technology that's surrounding them they will know nothing different. So it's very, it's important to kind of put yourself in their shoes. Social media is just the way they communicate. And there's a lot of reduced dependence on any kind of physical interaction. So that may be good or bad, but that's of course a result of being brought up in this generation of COVID and the influences of COVID. So they're virtually learning, they're virtually interacting with their friends. So it's a shift again, and that's why it's really important, regardless of how the world looks in the next 10 years. This is foundationally an experience that they've had as young children that will influence them as they continue to grow. They're considered pre-consumers, but as we talked about, they really influence their parents' purchasing decisions. And there's an estimate of reaching 670 billion in the U.S. Per year. So while you don't specifically expect them to pull out a wallet or have their e-commerce ready to go, they are influencing their parents, and they are educating their parents as well. So at a young age, parents are watching, and oftentimes, you would see with the virtual learning or any kind of socialization, they would help their parents to get online, to converse. And so there is a respect and a level of, I don't know how to do this, but my 8-year-old kid can help me get online. So there's a
Yeah,
understanding
there's
that
been a
they're
lot of
savvy.
that. There's been
Yes,
a lot
there
of,
has been.
and you're seeing
Yes,
some of these young kids already. They're literally born with technology.
yes.
Because you're looking at a lot of these very, very young children are already, instead of going to preschool, they're doing preschool online. They're doing
Mhm,
grade 1 online, grade 2 online. It's amazing.
mhm.
I know somebody posted the other day, and I think her daughter is all of 5 years old, I think, and she was amazed at how long her daughter is able to sit still in front of the computer and concentrate and follow along. She was quite intrigued to see
It's
her
really
ability
interesting.
to sit for as long as she did.
That's really interesting. And it is kind of this whole discussion is put yourself in their shoes, even if they're little shoes, because the way they're thinking and influencing the economy and how, products and services are consumed is going to have a major impact. And they've had some significant events in their lives that have shaped them differently than previous generations. So, it's kind of a crystal ball when you're thinking about the alphas, but what we do know and how we can think about, moving forward with this generation is going to be important. And as they continue to get older, they'll have more voice and more income. So while we don't have a lot of statistics on marketing to them, we do know they're hyper connected. They're very independent, as the examples you just brought up, Bridgetti, of being able to sit still and interact. They're experts at using technology. They're helping support us. They are very visual. They prefer visual formats and that screen online visual, not necessarily like a chalkboard or a storybook. They want to see it on their screens. And again, they're very diverse ethnically. So, and they're exposed because they have all this access. They're exposed to much more of the world. So there's an interaction of cultures and backgrounds that they're able to access that is unprecedented. So understanding this kind of global view that they have, the world is really getting smaller as they have more ability to connect, and they're making, they have friendships around the world in ways that, maybe we couldn't have as children because we just didn't have that kind of access. So being aware of that is really important. The example I have here is just, again, it's Chef Boyardee. So it's kind of geared to children, but parents make the purchase. But as you said, keeping kids occupied, they've created this game so that kids are playing a game. They see the advertising. That game actually incorporates some of the Chef Boyardee foods. And so when you're in a grocery store, or if your parents are shopping online and they see a Chef Boyardee, I want that because they connect it to something that they've had an interaction with, which may be unlikely or untraditional, but it's certainly a way to capture their attention, which then influences their parents who have that buying power at this time. So it's fascinating. I'm excited for this generation to see how they're shaping the future and influencing marketing overall. So
Absolutely. I must tell you something interesting. Someone showed me a TikTok. I think this kid was around 3 years old, and I was absolutely fascinated to see. This kid was screaming, and you initially don't know why the kid's screaming, and eventually, you see the mom in the background sitting on her mobile phone, and this kid's screaming away, and eventually she says, "Here you go," and he stops crying, and in two ticks, he's literally scrolling through his mom's phone until he gets onto the right screen, and then he clicks on the icon to open up this game that he wants to see, or a video. He clicks on the icon. He knew how to turn it then into landscape so that he sees a bigger image. And I thought, oh my gosh, this kid is like 3 years
wow.
old. But you see this tiny little finger, like, knowing exactly what it's looking for.
Mm.
And then knowing how to turn the phone into landscape and get the big picture. I was, oh my
That is
goodness.
huge. How many times have I struggled with turning my phone into landscape? That is amazing. That's a great story. And it's amazing how we can underestimate the influence that they've had to be able to technically interact with something so, just so smoothly. And, to know that that's an expectation that's being set, that they will get easy access to what they want. They will be interacting from a digital perspective. That's going to be a big portion of how they're interacting in life. So it is something to definitely keep in mind if that's a target market, or their parents, that you're interacting with. I did want to also throw some cautions up, because we want to give you guys the whole story. It's important to recognize that there are big differences within each generation. So I think we've kind of hopefully demonstrated that it's really important not to generalize, to identify who your markets are, and to tweak your messaging if you're talking across generalizations. But not to, also to be cautious to not be so like, oh, this generation only likes this and this generation only likes that. So I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, I realize, but people don't like to be labeled or pigeonholed. So you have to be mindful of that when you're putting together your communications, your campaigns, how you're supporting your marketing efforts. But also, when you're just focusing on one particular generation, you may be missing some opportunities. So if you're thinking, if you're doing some strategic planning, think about how your products and services may be, keys to other generations that you haven't thought about before, that may be wanting and eager to interact with your products and services. They just need to be, reached out to in the proper way. So I love to say age is just a number. Woo woo. So I don't know if that needs much explanation, but it is. Just wanted to point that out. You can feel very within all of these different generations. There's times when I felt like part of all of them. So remember that when you're communicating. So you really want to, make sure you're identifying your ideal customer and you can start generationally. You can start thinking, okay, this is where we are. And then kind of, again, think about how this might play out, knowing a little bit more about the different generations that we talked about. And I think what's really important, and we often think, it's important to kind of gauge your target. And sometimes we overlook like a research because it sounds expensive. It doesn't have to be. You can, think about with a, knowledge of what your assumptions have been in the past and how you may be able to open those up and service a much more broader market. If you have sales teams or you're selling, think about how you're interacting with your customers and clients. What are the questions they're asking? Are they asking for more digital? Are they asking for, do you guys have coupons, or do you have a membership, or do you have a club? That type of thing. Pay attention to some of that feedback that sometimes you're like, we're working on it, or whatever it can be, a distraction. Try to record that, take it in and use it in your planning. And then, have listen to your prospects, your one-on-one conversations of what people want. So you don't have to, set up a focus group. It can be very informal. It's just important to pay attention to who your clients are, what they're talking about, what they're reading, what they're consuming. And so that will, just increase your marketing efforts, the effectiveness of your marketing efforts.
Great tips. Oh my goodness me. Um, and before we end, I thought we could just quickly talk about what we could be talking about in the next episode. Because with world events being what they are and how they change, um,
Yeah.
I've seen how a lot of companies and brands have been accused of being tone deaf, and so it really is something that we need to pay attention to.
Yes, yes. There's so much, not just now, but current events are shaping the way people are feeling, what's important to them. And obviously right now we're going through some significant current events. And so we wanted to highlight how to be aware of the messages you're communicating, how to avoid stepping in some of those landmines that might possibly, happen. Even, it's interesting because obviously there's the issues that are going on in the world in the United States with it over the past like probably I don't know 3 weeks, our gas prices have over doubled. And right now I'm in the market for trading in one of my cars. And I was always kind of a laggard when it comes to electric cars. I'm like, oh my God. My friend showed me she got a Tesla, and I felt like my eyes were opened in that moment. I was like, it's cute, it's efficient, like, so how is that, kind of that evolution of everything that's going on in the world impacting me as a
Yeah.
purchaser of products and services. Obviously there's much bigger things that are going on that we want to be paying attention to, supporting, and aware of. So we want to address some of those issues and how we can provide advice from our perspective of how to most effectively market, be supportive and compassionate and understanding. So I'm excited for our next show.
I think that kind of rounds it off very, very nicely. You know, how there's an emotional connection to what's going on, but you want to hit the correct emotional
Right.
triggers in your
Exactly.
branding, because you can either use it to your advantage, or you could be working against your brand if you don't pay attention to emotional triggers. Because right now where we are, emotional triggers are huge, and we want to be
Yes,
sensitive to what's happening around us. So don't miss our next episode of Beyond the Logo.
absolutely.
So thanks. Thanks everyone for joining us, whether you've joined us live or whether you're catching this episode on the replay. We really do appreciate you staying with us and joining us. This was an interesting conversation about marketing to the different generations. And I am very, very much looking forward to our next episode when we will be discussing how you can be sensitive in your marketing campaigns to things that are current events in the world. And we definitely, in the last 3 weeks, have seen some huge current events that should shape how we present our products, goods, products, and services to people around us. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Stay safe. Until next time.